You just left a conversation. Nobody screamed at you. Nobody insulted you to your face. Nothing dramatic happened, but you walked away feeling smaller than when you walked in. And the worst part, you didn't even notice it at first. Because you've done it so many times, shrinking yourself has become automatic. It feels normal. It feels like just being a good person. That's exactly what they want you to think. Here's what nobody ever taught you. There's a difference between being humble and erasing yourself, between being kind and being used, between keeping the peace and slowly disappearing. Most people never learn that difference. They spend years making themselves smaller, softer, quieter, easier to deal with. They call it being mature. They call it being the bigger person. Niccolò Machiavelli would call it the most dangerous thing you can do to yourself. Maybe you've been the person who always shows up when others need you, the one who says, "It's fine," when it absolutely is not fine, the one who stays silent to avoid conflict, the one who over-explains, over-apologizes, and over-accommodates for people who never once ask how you're doing. And somewhere along the way, you convinced yourself that's just who you are. It's not who you are, it's what you were trained to do. This is not a video about becoming cold. It's not about becoming ruthless or cutting everyone off. It's about understanding one truth that the most powerful people in history already knew. Self-respect is not an emotion. It is a strategy. And the 5 lessons you're about to hear will change how you see every relationship in your life. Before we begin, drop this in the comments right now. I do not bend. I do not break. I rise. Let's go. 1. Stop training people to disrespect you. Let me ask you something direct. When was the last time you apologized for something that was not your fault? Not a big thing, a small thing. You said no to a plan and immediately felt guilty. You expressed a need and then rushed to soften it. You set a boundary and then spent the next hour wondering if you were being too difficult. If that sounds familiar, here's what you need to understand. You were not born like this. You were built like this. From the time you were young, you were taught that making other people uncomfortable was something close to a sin. Be agreeable. Be easy. Don't rock the boat. And so you learned, slowly and deeply, that your standards, your needs, your limits, those things were problems to be managed rather than rights to be respected. Now that programming runs quietly in the background of every interaction you have, every time you set a boundary, something inside you flinches. Every time you say no, something inside you panics. Every time you ask for what you need, something inside you whispers, "You're asking for too much." You're not asking for too much. You were just taught to believe you were. Machiavelli observed something that most people in his era refused to say out loud. He watched leaders, princes, ordinary men, and he noticed that the ones who were constantly accommodating, constantly softening themselves for others, were always the first to be taken advantage of. Not because people were evil, but because people naturally push to the edge of whatever boundary you set. And if you set no boundary, they push until there is nothing left of you. Think about it this way. You go to work. A colleague needs help. You help. The next week, they need help again. You help again. 2 months later, it's assumed you didn't sign up for this. But somewhere in the sequence of small yeses, you trained them. You taught them that your time, your energy, your capacity has no limit and no cost. That's not their fault. That's the lesson you gave them. In your friendships, maybe you're always the one adjusting your schedule, always the one who drives to their side of town, always the one who compromises on the plan. And you've told yourself that's just who you are. You're flexible, you're generous. But generosity without a bottom is not generosity. It's a slow erosion. In relationships, maybe you apologize for your emotions. You have a feeling, and before you even express it, you're already softening it, cushioning it, making it smaller so it doesn't inconvenience anyone. You've turned your own inner experience into something you have to apologize for. Here is the psychological truth underneath all of this. Every time you lower your standard to accommodate someone, you don't build goodwill. You recalibrate their expectations. They don't think, this person is generous and I should appreciate them. They think, this is the level of treatment that's acceptable. And the next time they push a little further, that new level becomes the floor. Machiavelli wrote in The Prince that a leader who constantly gives concessions does not earn loyalty. He breeds appetite. Every surrender is not seen as kindness. It is seen as evidence that more can be taken. People do not respect what costs them nothing. Epictetus understood this from a position that most people cannot imagine. He was a slave, literally owned. He had no legal rights, no freedom of movement, no control over his physical circumstances. And yet he built one of the most powerful philosophies of personal sovereignty that has ever existed. He looked at his situation and said, "They can own my body. They cannot own how I respond to this." He once asked, "How long will you wait before you demand the best for yourself?" He didn't ask that from a comfortable position. He asked it from chains. If a man with no freedom could hold that standard inside himself, what is your excuse for lowering yours? Here's the thing most people misunderstand about having standards. They think standards push people away. They're afraid that if they stop accommodating, they'll end up alone. That if they stop bending, everyone will leave. Some people will leave. And that is the point. Because here's what Machiavelli knew, and what took most people decades to understand. The people who disappear when you stop being easy to take advantage of, they were never really there for you. They were there for the version of you that required nothing in return. They were there for the access. When you started having standards, they didn't lose you. They lost their access to you. Those are two completely different things. The people who stay when you start demanding to be treated with basic dignity, those are the only people worth keeping. Everything else is just noise that needed to be filtered out. Your standards are not walls. They are filters. Now let's make this real. Because theory without application is just philosophy that stays on the screen. At work, when a colleague consistently redirects their responsibilities toward you, every time you absorb it without comment, you are not being a team player. You are writing them a permission slip. You are signing your name to a contract you never agreed to. The moment you hold your line, professionally and calmly, the dynamic shifts. Not because you became aggressive, because you became legible. You communicated something clear. This has a cost. In friendship, if you are always the one rearranging, always the one who travels to them, always the one who adjusts, the friendship is not balanced. It is convenient for them. And convenience is not the same as connection. One of them values you. The other, one just values your availability. In love, if you apologize for your emotions, if you shrink your feelings to fit the emotional space someone is willing to offer you, you are not being low maintenance. You are disappearing inside someone else's comfort zone. And one day you'll look up and realize you've made yourself so small inside this relationship that you can no longer find yourself inside it. Here is the line that matters above everything else in this lesson. The people who left when you set standards were not taken from you. They were revealed to you. Every person who walks away the moment you stop being endlessly accommodating was showing you something important. They were never invested in you. They were invested in the version of you that cost them nothing. That revelation is not a loss. That is clarity. And clarity, even when it's painful, is always more valuable than comfortable illusion. Your standards do not need to be explained. They need to be maintained. You don't owe anyone a 3-paragraph justification for why you need to be treated with respect. You don't need to build a legal case for your own dignity. You just need to hold the line. Quietly, consistently, without apology. Drop this in the comments right now. My standards are not up for debate. 2. The more you explain, the weaker you look. Not everyone who enters your life comes to add to it. Some people come to take from it. And the most dangerous ones are not the obvious takers. They're the ones who disguise the taking as need. Here's how you know the difference. There are people in your life who are genuinely struggling. They're going through something hard. They're honest about it. And when you show up for them, they're grateful. The relationship has weight on both sides. Even in their difficulty, they're still present for you in whatever way they can be. Then there are people who use chaos as a currency. Their life is always a crisis. There is always something wrong. There is always an emergency that requires your immediate attention, your emotional energy, your time. And if you look closely, and I mean really closely, you'll notice something. The moment you solve one crisis, another appears. Because the crisis was never really the point. Your attention was. Machiavelli observed this about people who create instability around them. He noticed that those who consistently generate disorder often benefit from the disorder in ways that are not immediately obvious. The disorder keeps people close. It keeps people focused on them. It keeps people needed, which is exactly what the chaos creator wants. Now here's what this costs you. Picture this. You're getting ready for something important, something that matters to you, and your phone rings. It's that person. There's a situation. There's always a situation. 2 hours later, you've talked them through it, you've calmed them down, and they're fine. Completely fine, as though nothing ever happened. And what happened to the thing that mattered to you? It's still there, unfinished, postponed, deprioritized. This is not helping. This is being harvested. Your peace is not something they value. It is something they consume. Here is the psychological layer underneath this that most people never see. This pattern works through something called intermittent reinforcement. The person is not always in crisis. Sometimes things are fine. Sometimes they're warm and present and appreciating you. And then the crisis comes again. And because you've experienced the good periods, you keep returning. You keep showing up. You keep hoping that this time things will stabilize. They won't. Because the instability is not a problem they're trying to solve. It's a pattern that's working exactly as intended for them. And here's the deeper damage. The longer you operate as someone else's emotional emergency service, the more your identity starts to organize itself around their chaos. You start to feel most purposeful when you're solving their problems. You start to feel guilty when you're focused on your own life. Their emergency becomes your default mode, and your own agenda becomes something you'll get to later. Later never comes. Ask yourself something honest right now. When was the last time this person asked how you were and actually waited for the answer? When was the last time they showed up for something that mattered to you, without needing to redirect the conversation back to themselves within 5 minutes? If you're struggling to remember, that's your answer. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Here is the context that changes everything about that line. Marcus Aurelius did not write that from a quiet room. He wrote it while managing the largest empire in the known world. He wrote it during plagues and wars and political betrayals from people he trusted with his life. He was not removed from chaos. He was submerged in it every single day. What he understood was not how to escape chaos. He understood how to maintain an interior stillness that chaos could not reach. He built a wall around his center, not with distance from the world, but with a decision about what he would and would not allow to occupy his mind. Machiavelli understood the practical version of this. A leader who allows himself to be pulled into every subordinate's crisis will have no capacity left for the decisions that actually matter. He becomes reactive. He becomes a responder rather than a director. And the moment you become purely reactive, you've handed control to everyone around you. If you're constantly responding to everyone else's storms, you will never have the clarity to navigate your own. Now here's where people get this wrong. They think the only options are full presence or complete abandonment. Either you're there for everyone all the time, or you're a cold and selfish person. That is a false choice, and it's a choice that benefits the people consuming your energy, not you. There is a third position. Strategic distance. Strategic distance is not coldness. It is not abandonment. It is the recognition that you cannot pour from an empty vessel, and that genuine help requires you to be intact. When you are constantly depleted from absorbing other people's chaos, you can't actually help anyone with anything real, including yourself. The most caring thing you can sometimes do for someone caught in a pattern of chaos is to refuse to participate in the pattern, not with anger, not with rejection, just with a calm, consistent boundary that says, I care about you and I am not available to be your emergency. There is also something that people rarely consider. When you continuously rescue someone from the consequences of their chaos, you are not helping them grow. You are removing the very friction that would otherwise force them to change. Your availability becomes the reason they never have to become more capable. You are not their solution. You are the reason they don't need one. That is a hard truth, but it's the truth. Here is how you start to tell the difference in real time. After a conversation with someone, ask yourself one question: do I feel fuller or more drained? That's not selfishness, that's data. Your energy is a finite resource. The people who deserve consistent access to it are the ones who treat it with respect, not the ones who treat it like a supply that exists purely for their use. You are allowed to be selective about where your energy goes. That's not cruelty, that's self-preservation. And self-preservation is not something you need to justify to the people who are benefiting from your lack of it. Here is what Machiavelli would say to you directly. You cannot build anything of value, not a life, not a career, not a version of yourself worth respecting, while you are constantly occupied with managing someone else's manufactured emergencies. Every hour you spend inside their chaos is an hour you did not spend building your own clarity. And over time, that accumulates into a life that looks like everyone else's priorities and nothing like yours. Your peace is not a luxury, it is the foundation. It is the condition under which you think clearly, decide well, and build something that actually reflects who you are and what you're capable of. Protect it like it's the most important thing you own. Because it is. Drop this in the comments. Their mess is not my problem. 3. Stop trying to impress people who don't care. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that nobody talks about. It's not the exhaustion from working hard. It's not the exhaustion from going through something difficult. It's the exhaustion that comes from performing for an audience that isn't watching. You know this exhaustion. Maybe you're living inside it right now. You're working harder. You're showing more effort. You're being more consistent, more reliable, more impressive than you've ever been. And nothing is shifting. Because the person you're doing all of this for has already made up their mind about you. They decided before you started. And all your effort is going into a wall. This is one of the most brutal and least discussed energy leaks in human experience. Not dramatic failure, not obvious rejection, just the quiet drain of trying to matter to someone who has already decided you don't. Machiavelli said something about this that cuts through everything. He understood that trying to persuade someone who has decided against you is not a strategy. It is a surrender of your resources to someone who will use those resources to confirm the opinion they already held. Don't waste energy trying to convince an opponent you're not a threat. Use that energy to actually become stronger. Here's yours. Picture the dynamic you're in. The manager who overlooks your contributions. The friend group where your ideas are heard through a filter of dismissal. The person you care about who receives your effort without acknowledgement. You are not invisible because you haven't done enough. You are invisible because they have decided not to see you. And here is the question that Machiavelli would ask, that most people are too afraid to sit with. Who is benefiting from your continued effort? Think about that carefully, because when you keep trying with someone who doesn't acknowledge your value, you're not just wasting your time. You're actively funding their comfort. They receive your effort. They receive your availability. They receive your energy, and they give you back just enough hope to keep you trying. That hope is the trap. Here is the psychological mechanism that keeps people locked in this cycle. It's called the sunk cost trap, and it operates in relationships the same way it operates in every other kind of investment. You've already given so much time, so much energy, so much emotional weight to this person or this situation. And the thought of walking away feels like admitting that all of that was wasted. So you invest more. You try harder, not because there's genuine evidence things will change, but because stopping feels like losing. Machiavelli had no patience for this thinking. He was precise about strategy. A tactic that produces no results after repeated application is not a tactic that needs more effort. It is a tactic that needs to be abandoned. Continuing to apply a failing approach is not persistence. It is avoidance wearing the mask of dedication. The cycle looks like this. The more you try to prove your worth, the more you appear to need their validation. The more you appear to need their validation, the less they respect you. The less they respect you, the harder you try to prove your worth. There is no exit from this loop through more effort. There is only one exit, and it requires a decision, not an action. Seneca understood the cost of misaligned effort from personal experience. He wrote, "If a man knows not to which port he sails, no wind is favorable." Here is the full weight of that line. Seneca wrote it after being exiled from Rome, stripped of his status, his influence, his social position, everything that had defined his public identity. He had no audience left to perform for. And in that exile, in that forced removal from everyone whose approval he might have sought, he finally found the direction that was actually his. The exile was the gift, because it removed the wrong audience. When the wrong people can no longer watch you, you finally start moving in a direction that belongs to you. Machiavelli would frame it this way: you can be exceptional at the wrong game and still lose everything. You can be the most reliable person in a room full of people who don't value reliability. You can be the most present person in a group of people who don't value presence. Excellence aimed at the wrong target is not excellence. It is waste with extra steps. Now here is the psychological inversion that changes everything once you really understand it. People are not drawn to those who are trying to impress them. They are pulled toward those who appear not to need to. This is not a trick. It is how human attention actually works. We are drawn toward what seems complete, what seems self-contained, what seems to have a gravity of its own that does not require our participation to exist. The moment you begin performing for someone, you broadcast a signal. I need something from you. And that need shifts the entire power structure of the interaction immediately and irreversibly. When you stop performing for the wrong people, something real happens. The energy you were burning on their approval starts flowing back to you. And that energy, redirected into your own development, creates something that no performance could ever create. Not the appearance of value, actual value. The kind that exists whether or not anyone is watching. The kind that cannot be dismissed because it's not dependent on anyone else's acknowledgement for its existence. And here is what happens when actual value accumulates quietly. The right people appear, not because you searched for them, not because you positioned yourself for their attention, but because you became someone they were drawn to without any effort on your part. That is what Machiavelli called real positioning. You don't chase the right outcome. You build until the right outcome becomes a natural consequence of who you are. The people who will genuinely see you don't need a performance. They don't need you to convince them. They look and they recognize something. And the recognition is immediate because it's real. The people who need a 3-year audition before they'll consider acknowledging your value, let them find someone else to audition. You have run out of time for that particular production. Here is what this lesson demands of you practically. Look at where you are investing the most effort right now, not where it's hardest, because hard and fruitless are not the same thing. Look specifically at where consistent effort is producing diminishing return. Where are you working for an audience that left the building a long time ago? Identify it honestly. Without the story you've been telling yourself about why it might still work, just look at the evidence of what has actually happened, not what you hoped would happen, and then make the redirect. Not with anger, not with drama, with the quiet precision of someone who has simply decided that their resources belong somewhere they can actually grow. Your value does not require witnesses to be real. Your worth does not need to be performed for people who have already walked out. Drop this in the comments right now. I perform for no one. I build for myself. 4. If they only value you when you obey, leave. Let's be clear about something from the very start. Walking away is not weakness. It has never been weakness. The idea that walking away means you gave up, that you failed, that you weren't strong enough to make it work. That idea was built by people who benefit from you staying. Think about who actually benefits when you stay in something that is diminishing you. Think about it carefully. It is not you. Machiavelli was direct about this in a way that made people deeply uncomfortable. He watched leaders hold losing positions because of pride, because of fear of how retreat would look, because they had invested so much they couldn't bring themselves to leave. And he watched them lose everything as a result, not because they weren't capable, but because they confused staying with strength, and the confusion cost them everything. Staying in a losing position is not strength. It is a refusal to see clearly. Here is the distinction that changes how you think about this entirely. There are two kinds of walking away. The first kind is emotional. Something happens, you get hurt, you react, you leave in the heat of it. That kind of walking away is just another reaction. It's not a decision. It's a feeling wearing the costume of a decision. And feelings, when they pass, often pull people straight back to where they started. The second kind is different. It's the kind that comes after observation. After you've watched the pattern repeat enough times to know it is a pattern and not an exception, after you've been honest with yourself about what is actually happening versus what you hoped was happening, after the evidence has accumulated past the point where hope can override it, that kind of walking away is not reaction. It is clarity. It is the calmest, most powerful thing a person can do. The first kind leaves in noise. The second kind leaves in silence. Machiavelli respected only the second kind. Now here is the part that most people never say out loud about why they stay when they know they should go. It is not hope. Not really. If you strip away the stories you tell yourself about why this might still turn around, underneath all of it, there is something more honest. Fear. Specifically, the fear of the empty space that walking away would create. You are not afraid of losing them. You are afraid of losing the version of yourself that existed inside the effort of trying for them. The person who believed enough to keep going. The person who showed up every day with the hope that this time it would be different. Walking away doesn't just end the situation. It ends that particular version of you. And even when that version is exhausting you, even when it is costing you more than you can measure, it is familiar. And familiar, even when it is painful, feels safer than standing in the open space of the unknown. That fear is the mechanism, and it is the only thing keeping most people in situations that are quietly, invisibly, consistently making them smaller. Machiavelli would say this. A strategist does not hold a position that cannot be defended simply because he fears what retreat will look like to others. He assesses the position without distortion. He sees it as it is, not as he wishes it were. And when the position cannot be held without destroying his capacity to fight any future battle, he moves, not in panic, not in emotion, deliberately. He preserves what he has left for the battles that actually matter. The battles that matter are ahead of you, not the ones you are currently losing in a position you should have left a long time ago. Here is what staying too long actually costs you. And I want you to really sit with this. Every day you remain in something that requires you to be less than you are, you recalibrate downward. Slowly and without drama, you begin to accept treatment as normal that is not normal. You start to believe that the way you are being treated is a reflection of what you're worth, not because anyone told you that explicitly, but because the evidence of daily experience is powerful, and the brain eventually believes what it repeatedly experiences. Over time, the gap between who you were and who you are becoming without noticing it closes in a direction you never chose. There is no single day you can point to. It is not one conversation or one incident. It is the accumulation of all the small moments where you chose to accept a little less than you deserved because the alternative felt like too much uncertainty. And those moments build on each other until one day you look up and you don't recognize the landscape of your own life. Marcus Aurelius faced a version of this that is worth understanding. People within his closest circle, people he had elevated and trusted, moved against him. He had every public reason to respond with force, to make a visible example of it, to prove to everyone watching that this had consequences. He did not do that. He continued building. He continued working. He responded to the betrayal with a quality that is much rarer and much more powerful than anger. He responded with focused indifference, a visible refusal to let the betrayal occupy more of his attention than it deserved. He did not explain. He did not confront publicly. He did not seek acknowledgement of what had been done to him. He just kept moving. And in doing so, he sent a message that no dramatic response could have matched. The message was, "You are not significant enough to derail me." That is what strategic silence communicates. Not that you have nothing to say, not that you didn't notice, not that it didn't hurt, but that engaging with it, explaining yourself to it, fighting for validation from it, would be beneath what you are building. Machiavelli was precise about this. The moment you explain your reasons for leaving to the person you are leaving, you hand them the tools they need to pull you back. They will find the gap in your explanation. They will reframe your perspective. They will use your own words to construct the argument for why you should stay. You don't explain. You don't justify. You don't debate it. You simply stop accepting less than you deserve. And that stopping is the most complete statement you can make. Now, the part of this lesson that is the most honest. It will hurt. Leaving something you've invested in, even something that was diminishing you, produces real pain. Your nervous system does not distinguish between losing something good and losing something harmful. Loss registers as loss. The grief is real. The discomfort is real. But there is a fundamental difference between the pain of leaving and the pain of staying. The pain of leaving moves. It runs through you and you come out somewhere with more space, more air, more possibility than what was behind you. The pain of staying is static. It just accumulates, day after day, quiet and heavy, until one morning you look in the mirror and wonder where you went. You already know which one you're choosing. You knew before you started watching this. Drop this in the comments. I leave before I lose myself. 5. Never beg to be chosen. Here is the last lesson, and it is the most important one, not because it's the most dramatic, but because it is the one that carries everything forward. After you've stopped apologizing, after you've protected your peace, after you've walked away, this is what you do next. And this is what determines whether any of it actually mattered. Machiavelli was not interested in temporary victories. He studied outcomes that compounded, actions that built on each other until the result became undeniable. He was interested in what lasts. And here is what lasts. Not the argument you won, not the boundary you set once, not the dramatic exit. What lasts is who you become when no one is watching and you're still choosing to build something real. Machiavelli would say this to you directly. The most effective form of answering every person who doubted you, dismissed you, or decided you weren't worth their attention is simply to become someone they cannot explain away. Not someone who announces their transformation, not someone who posts about the journey. Someone who builds quietly until the result is so real and so present that it requires no commentary. Now, here is the version of this that most people get backward. They try to change their behavior first and wait for their internal sense of self to catch up. They act confident and hope the feeling follows. They set boundaries and wait to believe they actually deserve them. They perform the version of themselves they want to become and hope the performance eventually becomes genuine. That sequence is inverted, and it's why most attempts at change collapse under pressure. Machiavelli studied this in the leaders who consolidated real power versus those who performed it. The ones who performed authority were always exposed eventually. The moment circumstances became genuinely difficult, the performance crumbled. But the ones who had decided internally, who had made a settled, uncontested commitment to who they were, those were the ones who held. The decision came first. The behavior was simply the visible evidence of it. This is practical and immediate for you right now. The moment you decide at a level that doesn't require daily reinforcement, that you are not someone who accepts being made invisible, that you are not someone whose worth is conditional on other people's recognition. Every decision that follows is different, not because you're forcing it, because it flows naturally from who you've decided to be. You stop explaining yourself to people who aren't listening, not through discipline, through irrelevance. Their need to understand your choices stops feeling necessary because your sense of yourself no longer depends on their comprehension. You stop performing for the wrong audience, not through effort, because you no longer feel the pull. The thing that made the performance necessary was the hunger for their acknowledgement. When that hunger resolves because you've given yourself what you were seeking from them, the performance becomes pointless. Epictetus arrived at this understanding from circumstances that make most people's difficulties look mild. He had nothing, no freedom, no rights, no guaranteed future. And he sat in that complete deprivation and asked himself the only question that actually mattered. Who am I in my own mind? Not in their records. Not in their perception of me. In my own clearest and most honest self-understanding. Who have I decided to be? He decided to be free. Before any external evidence supported that decision. He decided that the interior of his mind was sovereign territory, that what happened inside him required his permission in a way that what happened to him did not. And from that single internal decision, made in conditions that should have made it impossible, he built something that influenced the thinking of emperors. People who had every material advantage he lacked. People who had everything the world could offer. They went to Epictetus because he had something they couldn't buy and couldn't manufacture. He had decided. He said, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. The saying comes first, the internal declaration, the settled, unhurried certainty about who you are. And what you decide in that interior space, what you carry as your understanding of your own worth and your own direction, that is not invisible to the people around you. It transmits, not through what you announce, through how you carry yourself in the small moments, through how you respond when things don't go as expected, through the quality of your presence when there's nothing to perform for. People read these signals without knowing they're reading them, and the signal that comes from someone who has genuinely stopped needing external validation to confirm their internal sense of worth is a signal that is very difficult to dismiss. It produces something close to respect by default, not because you demanded it, because the internal coherence of who you are makes dismissal feel inappropriate. That is what makes someone impossible to look past. Machiavelli understood this about power. He wrote that the most dangerous person in any room is not necessarily the loudest or the most decorated. It is the one whose full depth remains unknown, the one who carries more than they display, the one whose silence feels inhabited rather than empty. That quality does not come from mystery as a performance. It comes from the genuine accumulation of something real, something being built quietly without needing an audience to validate the process. Here is what building in silence actually means in practice. It means you stop seeking feedback on your growth from the people who would be threatened by it. You stop explaining your direction to the people who would question it before it has the solidity to defend itself. You stop looking for permission from people whose approval is not relevant to where you are going. When you share a goal before it's built, You invite opinions. Opinions create doubt. Doubt slows action. And suddenly the energy that should have gone into building went into defending, into justifying, into managing other people's reactions to your ambitions. Silence protects the process, not because you're hiding, because you understand that a seed does not need to be observed to grow, and that opening it up to examination before it has taken root does not help it. It just exposes it. And the absence of that seeking, the quiet self-containment of someone in the process of becoming, creates something in the people around you. They notice the shift without being able to name it. They sense that something has changed without being able to point to what. And because they cannot fully read it, they cannot dismiss it. What people cannot categorize, they begin to take seriously. Carl Jung observed something that connects to this final point. He noted that the person who has genuinely confronted themselves, who has done the interior work of deciding who they are, rather than simply reacting to who others need them to be, carries a quality that most people can sense but cannot articulate. It is the quality of someone who is not at war with themselves. And people are drawn to it because it is rare. 3 years from now, there are 2 versions of you. The first spent 3 years explaining, adjusting, shrinking for people who never asked them to stop, performing for audiences who had left the room. And they are still standing in the same place, waiting to finally be seen. The second spent 3 years building, without announcements, without seeking validation for the process, without requiring witnesses for each step. And what they built speaks now in a way that requires no explanation, tolerates no dismissal, and needs no permission to be exactly what it is. You know which one you're choosing. You knew before this lesson ended. Choose it now. Not after the video, not after you've thought about it for a week. Now, because the decision is where it starts. Everything else is just the evidence of the decision. Drop this in the comments. I build in silence. I rise without permission. Let me describe the person you are becoming. This person does not apologize for having standards. They do not trade their peace for someone else's chaos. They do not perform for people who aren't watching. They know exactly when to walk away, and they walk in silence, with their dignity completely intact. They build without an audience and do not require one. You started this video with a question you may not have put into words yet. Why do people not treat me the way I deserve to be treated? Here is the answer. Because you hadn't yet shown them how. Not by demanding it, not by explaining it, by becoming someone whose standards are communicated through every choice you make, every line you hold, every time you refuse to shrink for someone else's comfort. That is not something you can fake. That is not something you can perform. It is built from the inside, one decision at a time. The world does not adjust because you deserve better. It adjusts because you stop accepting less. Machiavelli did not believe in waiting for fairness. He believed in positioning yourself so clearly, so completely, so undeniably, that the world's treatment of you becomes a direct reflection of how you treat yourself. That is what you are building now. Not a mood, not a temporary resolution, a way of moving through your life that is finally completely yours. If something in these 5 lessons didn't just sound right, but felt true in a way that landed somewhere real, share this with someone who needs to hear it, not because the video was good, because the message is necessary. Subscribe, because what comes next goes even deeper. And drop this in the comments one last time. I do not lower myself. I do not beg. I do not explain. I simply become.